Good afternoon, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee. Can I welcome returning members and newly elected members who are on this committee this time, and also Chief Superintendent Carol Maguire and Local Senior Officer Craig McGoldrick from Police Scotland and Fire and Rescue Service Scotland, respectively. This meeting has been live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council website. Can I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off their video when you are not addressing the meeting. Those of you attending virtually who wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat function and you'll be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time, or you could write leave in the Teams chat function and then join this. This is required to allow us to record member presence. And please do not use the chat function for any contributions that are material to debates. We do have a couple of important reports to consider today, and I anticipate we will deal with the business in our usual efficient manner. Claire, Cernant and apologies, please.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm I've been advised of 2 apologies today, being from the Chair, Councillor Howie and Councillor Stitt. For the benefit of those members in the hall, we have currently 4 members on Teams, being yourself. No, look at that. Right.
It's Friday, it's okay.
Oh dear. For the benefit of the members in the hall, we've got 4 members on Teams, being Councillors Bell, Blake, Campbell and McFarlane. For the benefit of those on Teams, we have 3 members in the hall, being yourself, Chair, Councillors Bretty and Councillor Jameson. There's 2 members currently not present, being Councillors Karen Carruthers and Chrissy Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I approve of members' remote participation. Move on to item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make? Councillor Bell.
Thank you very much, Chair. Obviously, it's item 6 of the agenda here today. Page 32, 3.8 is College Mains. That was subject to deliberate fires. This property, to let you aware, members that aware, belongs directly to my mother. So I'm just wondering what. Do I need to leave the meeting for that section because it mentions College Mains as a property directly related to belong to my family?
Claire, could you provide advice on that, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. I was obviously up for the individual member to determine, but I would advise that you're merely advising the committee of that connection, and there'd been no requirement for you to leave.
Thanks, Councillor Bell. Agenda item 3, minute of previous meeting. Can we note the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of December 2021?
We don't need a proposer or a seconder.
That's fine, thank you. Item 4, delegation to Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee report by Head of Governance and Assurance. Claire's here to assist if any members have any questions. In terms of agenda item 4, I ask you to note point 3.1, 3.2 in terms of the role of the subcommittee. Can I open up to members for any questions? Okay. Thank you for that. The recommendation is members are asked to note the remit of the Police, Fire and Rescue Subcommittee as detailed at 3.2. Agenda item 5, Police Scotland and Dumfries and Galloway Local Plan Annual Performance Update from the 1st of April 2021 to the 31st of March 2022. Report by Head of Governance and Assurance. To note, Chief Superintendent Carol Maguire is here to assist if members have any questions. Can I ask if anybody has any questions on the report? Councillor Campbell.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just ask Carol a question in relation to the final section of her report under the table public confidence? I see from the table in the last entry number of allegations, quality of service, and for the last year the figure is 95. But if I look back to the first year of data that we have, the level was at 62. Obviously, there's no narrative along with this table, so I'd be grateful if the Chief Superintendent could maybe give the subcommittee an indication of the pattern that appears to be increasing, albeit in the last 2 years or so at a slow rate. But if she could give any indication, please, of her thoughts on what is the meaning in terms of the increase over the last years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, obviously, any complaint about the police we will look at. In terms of quality service, that relates to those circumstances where it is more around our process or our procedures rather than an individual officer. And I will need to get a full breakdown, which I can get for you from our Professional Standards Department. Without looking at that data, we have still continued to get some complaints around our response to COVID and COVID regulations, and I would fully anticipate that certainly over the last 2 years that will be a significant proportion of those. But I can get that full detailed breakdown from our professional standards and share that if you would like.
Thanks, Carol. I have to be honest, I kind of anticipated what it might be in terms of the police's role during the COVID pandemic. So I don't require any additional information. It was just to validate for myself that my analysis that it was linked to COVID, and if that's your view, I'm happy with that.
Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not directly related to the report, although it certainly may affect performance in the future. I understand there's been a recent change to the pension regulations within the police service, amend officers' determination to stay in the force. It's just to see if this, what effect this will have in D&G and any numbers that you can give, if that's correct. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely, and our Chief Constable has referenced this as well. The change, well, there's two changes, I suppose, to the pensions that might link to that in terms of the move onto the care pension scheme and also the removal of the commutation cap for those with 25 years service and 50 years of age, forget that round the right way. We have seen a higher rate of leavers from the organisation since the 1st of April, and that, I suppose, combined with the slower recruitment rates that we have seen the previous year due to COVID restrictions and what we had to put in place up at the college, and also the response to COP26 and the demands of that also put back some of our recruiting. So we are, across the force and within Dumfries and Galloway, under what our full budgeted establishment would be. Within Dumfries and Galloway. Constables, that's around, and I'm saying around because it can fluctuate. It's around 17 to 20 in the last figures, but that doesn't include the 9 officers that we currently have coming to V Division up at the Police College, and we are working closely with recruiting in the hope that we can get a similar number within the next recruitment intake. There's clearly lots of work being done within the division by myself and the rest of the senior management team around ensuring we keep that front line response resourced and at a force level, again looking at those priorities around response, public protection and our command and control and comms system.
And thank you for that answer. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple of more questions. Councillor Beretti.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, good afternoon. It was interesting that there's a couple of points here from 21-22, fraud and theft by shoplifting. The fraud is so varied, whether it's traditional fraud, which might be checkbook and physical things where people are actually coming to doors, and then there's the digital and telephone fraud. Clearly a big jump. What if you can tell, has that been primarily to, and given that digital fraud is on the increase, what sort of resources are you thinking that we may need to combat that in this next 12-month period?
Yeah, absolutely. The rise in the fraud is a trend not only within the division but across Scotland, unfortunately. There are some recording changes that impact on that figure that are detailed in the report, but ultimately that doesn't negate the increase in, as you say, that online and telephone scam type schemes that we've that are in operation, where callers are really quite convincing and they coerce the victim to remove or transfer funds from their account. One fraudulent scheme that we did see in the division involved the criminals purporting to be police officers as well. So we do work clearly around that comms, I suppose, a communication strategy with partners to try and educate and negate these things happening. And obviously when they do, for example, that one that I mentioned there with the criminals purporting to be police officers, we've got some very positive lines of inquiry that we're following with that, both locally and at a national basis. We are supporting and promoting the Take 5 for Fraud campaign, so we'll have various pop-ups in town centres, social media marketing materials at events, for example, and we're also engaging with joint work in trading standards for the Shut Out Scammers initiative, which obviously focuses, I suppose, more on that doorstep crime and the bogus caller, rogue trader piece. Nationally, we've obviously looking at increasing the cyber, introducing the cyber strategy and increasing the work that we do there, and I'll have to ensure that I have officers that are suitably trained and qualified to take that side forward in terms of the division as well. So that will all form part of the next 12 months.
Can I come back? And that's good, because clearly, and I have had experience from previous when in community council, and we've had your constables coming into community council, and this has always been one of the things which has been prominent in different parts of Dumfries and Galloway, depending where you are and depending on the demographics of the age. So where there are older generations of individuals living, some who may not have digital access but have telephone access and no family, they are more susceptible. Have you considered looking at models of information through other community actors to, even though if you may not have the police on site, but things that you can give other community actors access to that they can then disseminate?
We have done some of that as part of the marketing materials, but absolutely we will. I think it's a good way, and you make a good point that it is vulnerable people clearly that the people are targeting and that the people are being successful with. Do recognise that a lot of that demographic, as you say, don't follow social media in our, I suppose, more straightforward ways of engaging, and absolutely I'll take that forward to make sure that we can look at some of the third-party methods that we can use to bring that in. We work closely with banks as well in terms of their in terms of the strategy that we have, the financial harm strategy that we have in place with them, and we have had some successes with banks stopping at withdrawal because they have concerns in getting in touch with us. So there's various ways that we can do it, but yeah, always keen to expand how we can do that prevention piece.
Thank you, Councillor Barretti. Moving on, Councillor Jameson.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the figures on relating to drugs, the drug use and the supply of drugs, and also the case numbers are fairly consistent over the 5-year period, and your detection rates are very, very high. And I know there'll be a lot of information behind that, but I'm just wondering, is that indicative of drug usage, or just the number of people or incidents that you're coming across? And the detection rates, clearly if somebody's got in possession, that detection is fairly simple. What I'm driving at here is just to get a context of what the drug problems are. In what way do these reflect the problem that you have with drugs and that we have with drugs?
Yeah, as you say, because I suppose there's a number of factors around that. Clearly, in terms of the detection rates, we will take proactive action, either when officers come across somebody or obviously the more local intelligence-led work. We then have our national teams within Serious Crime Division looking at the organised crime, serious and organised crime aspects of it. I think it does give a fairly steady indication there that we do have there's no two ways around it, we do have an issue with drugs in the communities we do across Scotland. So part of our role is that enforcement piece with it. Obviously, we've also got an officer seconded into the Alcohol and Drug Partnership and work very closely around the prevention piece that we're quite keen to get, I suppose, more upstream with as a partnership to try and resolve those types of issues. But we have revised our divisional tasking and coordination process just so that we can ensure that we're continuing to develop that intelligence so that we can take that action through a targeted approach, which should allow us hopefully then to have more successes in terms of the operations that we do. We're obviously got the M74 running through the region, which is clearly a popular route for the crime groups to be transporting drugs into Scotland primarily and money out, but I work closely with our roads police and colleagues, and they have some real good successes in terms of the stops that they do on the M74, which is always positive and assists not only us but also the national picture.
Thanks very much. I know it's a difficult issue, and if you had more resources you'd probably be able to do more, but the concern for the general public is that we probably don't see a fraction of what's going on the ground, and your detection rates and your cases that you've picked up. How much are you not picking up? Okay, that's a very open question, but it's a really difficult one. But in matching that up with the perception of the drug issues, it's probably quite important that we need a context to the number of detected cases and the number that are undetected, if you like, which is a very hard thing to do. Appreciate that.
It's very difficult because we only know what we know, and there always will be people who use drugs that we won't be cited on. We certainly focus on the dealing side of things, and again alongside the preventative work to hopefully minimise and reduce the harm that's caused by drugs. But it's a bit of an unanswerable question, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson, Chief Superintendent. If there are no more questions from the committee, I've got a question I'd like to raise as well. You've been policing at a time of unprecedented challenges, I would say, and I've noticed. Councillor Barretti, I'll reframe that question later.
If Chair wants to finish her question.
It's not a problem, Councillor Barretti, on you go.
Right. Noticed here also on mobile phone offences. And going back to both the three-year mean and the 5-year mean, then the 20 or 21-22 figure, I'm sorry, I'm struggling to see it. I have to just check what I'm actually looking at because it's not so easy, is considerably down. So I would assume from that it's to do with the lockdown and COVID. And going back to an analogous figure, which would be the 18, 19, 19, 20 would be a much higher figure. I can speak from personal experience and over the last 20 years where I have seen drivers with mobile phones whilst driving, and I'm a professional, I used to be a professional driver, it's nothing I would do. But what kind of educational support are you thinking or potentially would like to do as opposed to trying to catch drivers in reducing this type of offence which can lead to fatal accidents?
Yeah, absolutely. Prevention's always a positive thing to do, and I think the road safety partnership will form part of that and taking it forward. In terms of the numbers being down, absolutely. In 2020-21, when we had travel restrictions, etc., that was always going to bring it down. I think in terms of the trend across the 5 years, there's also changes in vehicles and the improvements in terms of hands-free facilities that are now more and more common in vehicles that allows people to use their phone without in a legal basis. But yeah, absolutely, we'll do prevention around that. Part of our road safety campaign in the coming months will be emphasised on the Fatal 4 programme, which includes mobile phone offences along with speeding, seatbelt offences and drink and drug driving. And part of that will be an information and prevention campaign, and then obviously followed by the enforcement phases as we normally have.
Well, thank you very much. I agree, you're right about the wireless connection, but the evidence I've seen, scientific evidence, is that if you've got too many distractions when you're driving, your risk factors of having an accident are going to go up because your periphery vision is lowered. Should that not be one of the major things, that even though people think that going Bluetooth, whatever, is safe, it's not fully safe, it's just less risky than doing it with your hands, because it still impacts on your driving ability.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Distractions could take a number of forms. I don't disagree with that at all. But in terms of the offences, that wouldn't be an offence to use a hands-free system. But I don't disagree with you that absolutely any distraction in a motor vehicle can affect your concentration, which would then impact on potentially your ability to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Barretti. I don't see any more questions being raised. I'll go back to the issue that I had to raise. Thank you. I was talking about policing in a time of unprecedented circumstances, and what's concerning is the increase in assaults on emergency workers. I know some work's been done to try and mitigate that, but would you mind just expanding on that and what the trends are, if possible?
Yes, absolutely. As you see, that's been an increasing trend over the past 5 years. Unfortunately, the majority of those assaults on emergency workers are police officers, and the majority of those are at point of contact, so it's at point of arrest. In the main around that, but we do recognise that perhaps, and we spoke about this earlier as a partnership, there's potentially under-reporting from other frontline organisations. So earlier this year we launched the Your Safety Matters campaign as part of that that multi-agency campaigns, and the aim of that is to reduce, again, education, prevention focus, to reduce the number of assaults not only on police officers but other emergency services and frontline public sector workers. So we've started off with a media campaign and a series of engagement events, and those will continue obviously through the next 12 months and beyond. So we've got engagement sessions at Youth Beats and Dunham music festivals, for example, just within the next month or so, and we're also looking at other ways that we could potentially do focused education, perhaps looking at somebody from each of the services and talking through their experiences and what we can do. So there's lots of work that we're doing as a partnership to hopefully then take that forward, all with the aim of preventing and reducing the number of assaults that our workers unfortunately are being subjected to.
Thank you. I think it's an interesting point when you say under-reporting, because I think some education might have to be done with emergency workers themselves in terms of what they consider to be an assault.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is part and parcel of, I suppose, why we pulled together that multi-agency group, just to ensure that we were encouraging that reporting. And as I think one of the slogans in it is, it's not part of the job. It doesn't matter what job you do, it is not part of the job.
Thank you. Apologies. I'll move to the recommendation now. In terms of this report, members are asked to scrutinise the performance report for Dumfries and Galloway from Police Scotland for the period 1st of April 2021 to 31st of March 2022 as detailed in the appendix. Moving on to agenda item 6, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Dumfries and Galway Local Plan Annual Performance Update 1st of April 2021 to 31st of March 2022 report by Head of Governance and Assurance. And again, Craig McGoldrick is here to assist if members have any questions. I'll open up the meeting to member debate. Councillor Jameson.
I'm interested, and I probably know the answer, but it would be good to get some direction from yourselves. I'm looking at the deliberate fire settings, and Annandale North and Annandale South seem particularly bad. Is this derelict buildings or there's something beyond that?
Thank you, Councillor. Yep. Hopefully you can see from the report that the covering report that is, that we've actually looked to drag that out to acknowledge that in the first place. But yes, it's almost that trend that when you start to see the derelict and abandoned buildings and the lack of distraction for the youth, we start to see an uptick, if you like, in the deliberate fires. So yeah, you're right in your assumption of where it's coming from. It's just that preventative work, the multi-agency approach, the MATACs that will all get put into place to ensure that we continue to monitor and indeed start to drive that back down.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's an issue beyond the deliberate fire making, but it's something that adds to the need to do something about the derelict buildings. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. Move to Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chairman. One's just an observation. I think part of my papers seem to be written in Gaelic. I'm not so sure if everybody else is like that. Secondly, just in fairness to my fire service colleague, the question that asked of the police, I believe that may have an effect on fire service numbers in the region. If they care to make some comment on that, thank you.
Thank you, Councillors. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Obviously, it's the wider public sector that's been affected by the pension remedy. So we are dealing with the same challenges. I suppose to add a degree of context, within Dumfries and Galloway, we've got a high percentage of on-call staff, which make up our workforce, who are not directly affected by the pension adjustments. So we are probably working around the business continuity and staff resilience and succession planning with a little bit more scope. We do recognise that we're in a landscape which has changed, so our planning assumptions need to reflect that. As a national organisation, there's a huge amount of strategic focus on this, and we are similar challenges that was articulated well by the police about the ability to come out of COVID, get back to our full recruitment turnover and bringing people into the organisations. That's currently our focus. But you're absolutely right to point out the reassurance coming from myself at this stage. We are content with the numbers that we're seeing, and our succession planning that was in place is actually able to deal with those issues in the short term.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Chair. Question for Craig. Obviously, deliberate fire setting northwest Dumfries here. With we're sitting with 78, and 52.1 on incident per population of 10,000 Dumfries and Galloway. Also, the deliberate fires to date as well. It's a steady incline as well, up to 196. But I know for a fact that the police and the fire rescues and the community safety team are working hard to stop these deliberate fire settings. But looking at it is alarming for North West Dumfries. It's a way above the rest of them, well up above in the ladder. But compared to other areas across Scotland, are we finding a trend of deliberate fires in certain areas within Scotland, or is it just localised areas with North West Dumfries and Galloway? Which I'm wondering, obviously, Craig, you've been working at national level. I'm just wondering, are you seeing a trend just here, a localised trend, or we're seeing it in other areas across Scotland?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, there is a trend that's been identified nationally, and I think that would be fair to attribute that to a degree in the change of our human behaviour during the COVID period. If you take that into the context of the fact that we're probably limited in terms of that face-to-face and that presence within our community, that's where we've started to see that particular spike. We have a strategic group which is looking at the focus, and a number of outcomes from that will be the best practice. And Dumfries and Galloway always tends to focus on the best practice approaches that we're taking to try and drive these types of behaviours down. So yes, you're absolutely right. This is a trend that is out with Dumfries and Galloway. Our numbers still reflect that we're one of the safest regions to live in, despite our particular spike, and hopefully there's some reassurance in there that our approaches are also recognised as some of the best practice to deal with these and start to reduce the numbers.
Thank you, Craig. Any other issues? Councillor Beretti.
Good afternoon. Looking at the road safety aspect and road traffic collisions, I noticed that, as a colleague here said, Annandale East, Eskdale, Annandale North, clearly the highest in the region. And then looking at your gender profile, the age group 20 to 49 is the highest in certainly the male, and in the female it's the 50 to 79. Is it, and clearly we don't want to have road traffic accidents, and you don't want to go to them. I've seen too many of them in my lifetime. Is this, in your opinion, is it due to roads, training, age, conditions? What do you reckon it's in? And have you discussed it with other agencies to look at ways of mitigating these, in certainly not just in those two areas, but across the whole region?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I suppose it's one of the most obvious impacts that we've seen since we've started to come out of COVID. When you think about the restrictions that we lived in, the movements on the road were certainly reduced. When you lay that in the context of our own geography, the reason that Annandale and Eskdale tends to stand out is generally attributed to the M74 and the high volumes of traffic. So the number of accidents that happen there are not necessarily related to our communities or those that live within them. It's the transient driver that's a risk as well. Yes, and it is almost a doubling of incidents over that 12-month period from the previous, which maybe isn't necessarily reflected or easy to read from the initial graphs at the top of the page. But hopefully you see across the 5-year average that it's probably where we have been, which doesn't mean we should rest on our laurels, and we should absolutely start to drive and ensure that our road safety partnership is the mechanism where we're reducing that. But it is that recognition about the transient driver. We identify our vulnerable groups and we recognise that, and I suppose an example of how we continually try to combat that, whilst it might not be the 74, would be our recent approach to the number of motorcyclists that were travelling through the region for the North West 200. And again, across a period of a weekend in partnership with the ferries, colleagues in police and others, we were able to engage with the best part of 1,000 motorcyclists. So it's that type of approach that we would look to build on. It's the appropriate warning, signage and education for our drivers that are coming into the region, that we continue to look for the opportunities to manage and mitigate our total numbers.
Would it not be useful for the next presentation, when you do it next year, to put in an extra bracket of motorway accidents, which technically takes it out of our context of our A, B and C class roads, so we can see that it's not particularly the drivers of those two regions that are failing. That would be one point. There was also another thing that I know that we have got a demographic which is produced by Dumfries and Galloway Council detailing the ages of all our different regions. Would it not be useful also to have that incorporated into it, so we can see what the breakdown, the demographic breakdown of each region is, just simply the ages, because right across Dumfries and Galloway, the ages in the sense of, if you go to Stranraer, you go to the Rins, you might find people are older than, in the sense there's more retirees in that area. If you go to, if in case you go to another region, would something like that not be useful for us to look at as well?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm happy to take your points on board and look at that as we move forward. In terms of the report that you've got in front of you, that was actually a piece of work, a workshop with the previous committee that helped design and influence the detail that's on that. So again, you've got my commitment. I'm happy to go through those exercises. A word of caution, though, in terms of the road safety and how I report it, that's just a reflection of the instance that the fire and rescue attend. It's not the complete picture of the road traffic collisions, accidents that happen within the area, because that would come from additional shared information that would be key to tie in with police and Scottish Ambulance Service. So the reason we've adopted and present it to you is because we recognise it's a priority for us, and that's reflected in our commitment, our contribution to the Road Safety Partnership, but it comes in that sort of context that it's not your sole set of figures for reflection. The covering report that we provide in section 3.6, and apologies I don't have the same pack as you to give you a page reference, Appendix A as part of the papers, that's where we would try and articulate that this isn't in any way trying to suggest that the roads in Annandale and Eskdale are less safe than the others. It actually paints the picture there about the transient driver situation and the by population, by 10,000 reference.
Okay, Councillor Beretti? Yes. Thank you. I think it's a positive point that's been made in terms of changing statistical information, that we might take it back and review it if we feel it's right to do so via a workshop. Thank you. It's Friday afternoon. A workshop, that would be, if that's deemed necessary. Is that okay, Councillor Beretti?
Yes. Happy.
Thank you. Claire has just brought to my attention, I see that there has been a bit of a print gremlin, so that doesn't normally happen in terms of papers that are issued, so apologies for those of you who have had a bit of a challenge reading some of the names and numbers on the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service report. Not deliberate. Any more questions? I have a final issue to raise perhaps in terms of home fire safety visits. I know that in the last committee the issue was raised about the installation, the legislative requirement to install new fire alarms in homes. Is there an update on that? Have there been any specific challenges across the Dumfries and Galloway area?
In terms of an update, I would look to sort of point back to the Scottish Government legislation, and again, we are part of the bigger picture in terms of trying to ensure vulnerable or the high risk are absolutely being supported. What we do have is an uptick in the figures, and I've included that in the Appendix A just to give you a breakdown of the value that's been sort of fitted within homes within our communities, so to speak. It would be remiss of me not to point out that there is a bit of a challenge when it comes to that worldwide distribution of electronics, which is making it more difficult, and then you overlay that on the economics of the cost of everything, which is starting to show that we get less for our money, if I could put it in layman's terms. But we are absolutely committed. We continue to ensure that we support those within our communities at the highest risk. We've got a standard approach to that, which is a risk-based assessment, and even if we are not in a position to fit the interlinked detection under the standards, we still will never leave a premise without an interim measure and provide support and direction on how they can access and look to install their own interlinked system.
Thanks, Craig. That's reassuring. It was just an update. That's great. Thank you. No further issues in terms of debate. Move to the recommendation. Members are asked to scrutinise the performance report for Dumfries and Galway from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service for the period 1st of April 2021 to 31st of March 2022. Thank you. In terms of item 7, I have not been notified of any urgent business. Claire? No? Okay. Can I just say before we close, thank you to Police Scotland and Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, both in Dumfries and Galloway, and thanks to the staff who've put in all the hard work to prepare these reports. I think we sometimes forget how challenging that is, especially for an annual report. It's really, really challenging to get all that information together, and it can be challenging to deal with some of the issues that are raised, but thank you very much for your responses. That's been really good. Date of next meeting is Friday the 2nd of December 2022. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.